A warm welcome to our viewers here in Lagos and across the world. You're watching The World Today. I'm Joke Rogers. Here's what's coming up. John Swinney sworn in as the seventh First Minister of Scotland in a formal ceremony at the Court of Session in Edinburgh. Plus, at least one person killed, dozens homeless after massive tornado outbreak in the U.S. state of Oklahoma. The World Today begins right now. Elsewhere, Chinese President Xi Jinping is in Serbia. He received a warm welcome in the capital, Belgrade, as he arrived for talks with his Serbian counterpart, Aleksandar Vučić. President Xi met with enthusiastic cheers from a crowd waving Serbian and Chinese flags. The visit follows his two-day trip to Paris. His next stop is Hungary. Beijing remains the largest trading partner for both Budapest and Belgrade outside of the European Union. We're still in Europe now. We're talking more politics. John Swinney has been sworn in as the seventh First Minister of Scotland. He was confirmed in the role during a brief ceremony, a formal one, at the Court of Session in Edinburgh. Mr. Swinney takes office 25 years after he was first elected to the Scottish Parliament. Speaking after the ceremony, the 6-year-old said the appointment was an enormous privilege, but said it had been a very abrupt change for his family. The First Minister is now expected to appoint his cabinet in a series of meetings at his official residence. He vowed his minority Scottish National Party would seek to work collaboratively across Parliament with a particular focus on eradicating the curse of child poverty. Well, it was only yesterday that Stormy Daniels took the stand in former U.S. President Donald Trump's hush money trial, describing her alleged sexual encounter with him at a golf tournament in 2006. The judge, Joan Merchant, agreed that some of Ms. Daniels' testimony might have been better left unsaid. Mr. Trump is accused of falsifying business records to cover up a $130,000 payment to Ms. Daniels just before the 2016 election. The 77-year-old denies the charges. Meanwhile, in a separate indictment, Judge Eileen Cannon has indefinitely postponed Mr. Trump's classified documents trial in Florida, citing significant issues around classified evidence that would need to be worked out before the federal criminal case goes to a jury.
There are protests all over the country. I've never seen anything like this. Many graduation ceremonies are being canceled. They're canceled, as you know, in Colombia. They're canceling a lot of them. And we have a president that just refuses to talk because he can't talk. You know that, and so does everyone else. Legal expense that we paid was put down as legal expense. There's nothing else you could say. You don't have to put down anything, I guess. But we put down legal expense was legal expense. Is that a correct statement, Mr. Attorney? And everyone's saying, oh, gee, that's the fraud. That's what they're trying to get us on. The fact that we call a legal expense. They marked it down in the books. The check was signed. And the other thing, this was approved by all agencies. Everybody saw this. There was nothing being hidden at all. That's what they're all writing now. There's been nothing hidden. And it went through agencies, and I guess it went through the IRS also. It went through IRS. It went through the FEC. It went through everything. With all that's going on, they have no case. Every single legal scholar that I see, I mean, maybe there's somebody out there, some whack job, but virtually everyone that I've seen has said there's absolutely no case. It's a case that shouldn't have been brought. The previous DA wouldn't bring it. Bragg didn't want to bring it, and he brought it because I'm running in number one place. This all comes out of the White House and crooked Joe Biden. This comes from the White House, and it's all Biden because it's an attack on his political opponent. That hasn't happened in this country. It does happen in third world countries, but it hasn't happened in this country, and it's a shame. And the trial is a very unfair trial. It's a very, very unfair trial. The good news is they have nothing.
Staying in the United States, at least one person has been killed and dozens rendered homeless following a massive tornado outbreak in the U.S. state of Oklahoma. The windstorm destroyed residential buildings, damaged cars, and toppled trees in the city of Barnsdall. According to authorities, around 40 houses were damaged and one person reported missing. This is the second time the city has faced a tornado this year after a storm ripped through the town at the beginning of April. According to the National Weather Service, tornadoes were spotted in parts of Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio, while portions of Illinois, Kentucky, and Missouri were also under a tornado watch. Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird joins us now for more. Hi, Maria. Great to see you today.
To see you as well.
Right. So what more can you tell us regarding the trial? Key witness Stormy Daniels took the stand yesterday.
Stormy Daniels' testimony was what many would say compelling. It was even detailed to the point where the judge not necessarily cut her off, but told her she didn't have to go to that death. And so she was a very, very expressive in her testimony, very vivid, very colorful. And so it really depends on how the jury foresees this. But I think that it caused the former president to be very uncomfortable. It was even stated that he was audibly using profane language. Seen shaking his head several times, according to the transcript. So it made him extremely uncomfortable. And also stating that some of his reactions were thought to be to kind of intimidate the witness, which is why the judge obviously was speaking to him about that not being the case throughout her testimony. So it was something I think that was not expected. This was not necessarily the case that many thought would be potentially the greatest challenge for his reelection.
And the judge has already held the former president in contempt 10 times, fined him $10,000 and twice threatened to send him to jail. Why does Mr. Trump keep violating the gag order, knowing the consequences?
Well, you know, the former president has kind of made his entire campaign, his entire road to the White House, even previously, around media and around kind of spinning and around his very outward personality. And I think that is just within his how he operates. I don't think that he's intentionally or that he is choosing to. I think that is it's just very difficult for him, as we've seen throughout all of the cases that he's been involved in. And so I think we'll continue to see this, and it really depends on the judge whether or not he will move forward with some of those threats that he's made regarding potentially imprisonment if the former president continues.
And there are several indictments against Mr. Trump, making his trial this a historic one for a former president, a former U.S. president. If convicted, he could face prison time. He's just mentioned that, or probation. What's going to be the situation with the elections coming up this November?
This is, I think, a very concerning situation for him. I think that you could potentially see a convicted felon asking for people's votes. The question, though, is that if he sees prison time, we won't see that, obviously. It really depends on if he is convicted, what would be the next steps and what the judgment would be by the judge. So we know that it was not illegal for him to pay the $130,000. So it was illegal. That the court is looking at closely is how he hid the money within his business dealings, and if there was some reporting, some falsified reporting done on his business behalf in order to hide the money. And obviously, right there before the election season, what was done as it relates to potentially steering voters and not being truthful as it relates to the Stormy Daniels questioning if he ever had a relationship with her. So that, I think, is where the focal points are going to be. And that's what the jury's going to have to make a decision on, is whether or not those things did actually break the law.
And Mr. Trump's lawyers have proposed that the trial be held after his presidential rematch with U.S. President Joe Biden. Prosecutors, meanwhile, have pushed for it to take place this year. We know Mr. Trump has constantly called it a political witch hunt. What are people saying?
I think those who are in a strong base are in agreement with the former president. I think others were not expecting this hush money case to kind of take the spotlight and potentially be that case which puts him in a tough position to either be reelected or to even be eligible for reelection. So that, I think, is where many Americans are. They're wanting to see what is going to happen next. We know the former president has been before the court before, and he's been able to move forward. But we also know there's several other cases potentially out there that could potentially cause a great challenge to him, but it's not expected any other trials will necessarily take place before the election. So I think Americans are watching. I think that the U.S. election cycle is one that we've said before historic, but I think this one is very different than years before. And I think people are just hopeful that the democracy in America can continue forward. And so the hope is really around making sure that whatever is the case is done within the law and it allows the Constitution to move forward with a fair and free election.
And finally, Maria, to the weather situation in the United States. What's the update as we speak as regards the tornado outbreak in Oklahoma?
Yes, tornado outbreaks in Oklahoma. The weather conditions in the United States are just so vast, and the temperatures, and so it's causing. But this is a time of year that that Midwest region of Oklahoma does experience these type of tornadoes, and so they've obviously been bracing people for this. They have been monitoring. We have not seen any deaths or anything like that of that nature, but it is expected that there will be quite a few, whether they're small or even some larger ones that could hit Oklahoma, and that we will be watching them over the next 24 to 48 hours.
Thanks again, Maria. More severe weather now. 2 people have been killed after heavy rains triggered flash floods in China. Heavy rains have been pounding the southern Guangxi Autonomous Region for several days. Search and rescue operation as well as repair work are underway. The government has also launched a level 4 emergency response in view of the disaster. And authorities are warning of the risk of waterborne diseases as flash floods continue to pound Kenya. The World Health Organization has recorded 44 cholera cases in Kenya's Tana River County, the area most affected by the disaster. The WHO, Kenyan officials and other agencies have been monitoring the health situation and response around the country in the wake of the flooding. The floods have affected more than 250,000 people. Kenyan journalist Cyrus Mbati puts the death toll of the disaster across the country to at least 240.
Since the whole flood issue started in Kenya, almost 240 people have died as of today. Thousands of people are displaced, and men are seeking shelter in various places. Men are seeking shelter on the roads, schools, hospitals, schools which remained actually closed up to now. And the government is rushing here and there to try to save those who they can, because places like the southern part of the country, going to the coast area, people are submerged or marooned by water. I mean, when you go to Tana River, near Garissa, the Mombasa area, so things are thick there. The government seems to be overwhelmed. Today, we saw the government official led by the Interior Minister, Mr. Kithure Kindiki. They went to somewhere called Kijabe, where a place near where last week a similar incident happened, where flooding, where 61 people died, or rather 61 bodies have been recovered so far. Today, he was ordering almost 200 families to evacuate from the same area because they are lying in line of danger. So the challenge we have is that these people are being told to move, but they don't know where. That's the problem, because when you move 200 families from a village like that, it's a rural area, it becomes difficult to find them an alternative place to stay. But then the people rushing here and there. The president himself yesterday was in some slum in Nairobi. He gave out, he said that all victims who are being evicted from flood-prone areas. That's a riparian area near the rivers. They'll be paid 10,000 shillings. That's almost $100. But the people are saying this is so little. What can they do with it? Because you're telling almost 10,000 people to move out of those areas. How do you manage to them? Where do they go? Where do they eat? Where do they sleep? That's the challenge the government is facing. But then they are rushing here and there to try to address the issue of flooding. The rains to the last 1 day or 2 days have subsided away, but today projections are that they are going to come again back and continue causing havoc. Most roads in all areas are flooded. Those are now the roads are destroyed. It to be so costly for the government to kind of repair those affected roads.
Elsewhere now, Germany's efforts at energy transition for the future has helped to cut its dependence on fossil fuels by 65%, and Nigeria can do the same with a plan and political will to execute it. This was the message propagated by the German State Secretary and Special Envoy for International Climate Action, Jennifer Morgan, during a public lecture at the University of Lagos in Akoka. Ms. Morgan said Germany is looking to guide Nigeria into making similar changes for both human and economic prosperity. Our correspondent, Amarachi Ubani, reports.
She may have started out as an American environmental activist, but Miss Jennifer Morgan has naturalized in Germany, studying and providing solutions that have helped the country make the necessary energy transition from dependence on fossil fuels to renewables. It's a knowledge she's brought to the University of Lagos, one of the leading academic institutions actively seeking and implementing energy solutions to everyday needs.
We recently passed the most ambitious legislative package of climate and energy legislation in our history. We have a target backed up by a series of laws to achieve 80% renewables in the electricity sector by 2030. And we want and have a national law to be climate neutral by 2045. And according to our independent environment agency, we are on track, but we are not relaxing because we have much more to be done. But right now in 2023, we have 56% of our electricity that came from renewable energy sources. And that's in a country where our solar radiation is the same as Alaska. Imagine what we could do with your solar radiation here in your country. So we have a fully reliable electricity supply for everyday life and for business. And we're phasing out coal, which is our major fossil fuel, ideally by 2030.
She emphasized the danger in postponing mitigations against climate change, saying the weather crisis will happen more often in the coming years. Nigeria, however, has to find her own solutions in her other natural resources such as wind and solar.
Last year, the International Renewable Energy Agency produced a report on Nigeria. And it showed that actually renewable energy technologies will be key to achieving a sustainable energy mix and meeting the country's growing needs. And it also found that investing in renewables is equally, if not a bit more cost effective than continuing to invest the conventional fossil fuel path. And it also found that a scenario with rapid renewable energy expansion, Nigeria could provide, again, the electricity to its entire population 5 years sooner than under current plans. So Nigeria indeed has an ambitious energy transition plan. Your government is on it. Your country is well positioned to both meet national energy access goals and also remain a central player internationally over the years through renewable energies and hydrogen, and particularly from renewable sources. And Nigeria, as I mentioned, is also rich in lithium, which is in high demand if you're looking at a renewables-based economy.
A question and answer session follows her lecture as students and environmental experts highlight challenges of energy transition. Ms. Morgan again turns them to political will to achieve solutions. The conversation is expected to continue in other fora as the German government says it's looking to work with associations and groups invested in curbing the climate crisis. Amarachi Ubani, Channel Television News.
Welcome back. We're in South Africa now, and it's exactly 3 weeks to the country's election, and the Independent Electoral Commission has announced that over 27 million South Africans are set to participate in the upcoming 2024 national and provincial elections. This figure marks the highest voter turnout expected since the inception of democracy in the country. The elections are scheduled to take place on May 29th of this year. However, some small businesses are concerned that the imminent risk of economic turbulence and protest action during the election season could impact their operations. Our correspondent, Innocent Simosa, reports.
The recent Small and Medium Enterprises Confidence Index indicates that the 2024 elections are one of the most monumental and contested in South African history. Entrepreneur Sylvester Chibzo is hoping for a peaceful election. However, he warned that protest action during the election season could impact his operations.
No, the only thing in life, we are praying for peaceful election. And we believe South Africa is a peaceful election always. I've been here in 21 years, if I'm not mistaken. Since I've been here, there's no election that will be violent. But I believe this one, everything will be peaceful.
Sylvester says, given the opportunity, he would vote for the economic freedom fighters for these reasons.
No, if I do have the opportunity, I can vote for him because I see that he's a man who loves the African brothers and sisters.
Is it necessary for SMEs to prepare themselves?
We've run successfully many elections in both local, provincial and national without any hindrances. Is it necessary to prepare for any unforeseen events? Absolutely, for anybody, any business, any individual and any organization. But that doesn't mean that South Africa is under siege or is about to experience an explosion.
Ahead of any election, there is naturally a degree of uncertainty. In South Africa, the uncertainty is higher than usual, given that for the first time in democratic South Africa, there is the possibility that the ANC may lose its outright majority. For most investors and businesses, this uncertainty mainly relates to policy continuity. In other words, should the ANC lose its outright majority, could that mean a change in the general policy direction and approach?
The South African Special Risk Insurance Association, SASRIA CEO Mpumi Chikwe, recently warned that the uncertainty surrounding South Africa's upcoming elections could risk a repeat of the 2021 July unrest. And she's warning that businesses should prepare accordingly. Now, the July riots led to an estimated loss of 50 billion rands, 31.5 billion rands of which SASRIA covered. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Simosa, Channels Television News.
Well, a levy of 0.5% on all electronic transactions valued by the businesses specified in the second schedule of the Cybercrimes Prohibition and Prevention Act 2015 in Nigeria will now be remitted to the National Cybersecurity Fund administered by the National Security Advisor. This is contained in a circular from the Central Bank of Nigeria to all commercial, merchant, non-interest and payment service banks. This directive, which is set to begin in 2 weeks from May the 6th, has been generating reactions. Our business correspondent, John Mekwa, highlights some implications and concerns in this next report.
The Enhancing Financial Innovation and Access report shows that while 71% of urban adults have bank accounts in Nigeria, only 40% of those in rural areas have accounts. This has been largely attributed to insufficient infrastructure to support financial transactions. But there are a handful of Nigerians who were reluctant to embrace the electronic world because of charges. Currently, up to about 10 charges are attached to various electronic transactions, compounded by the now introduced Cybersecurity levy. While the legality of the Cybersecurity levy is founded on the Cybercrimes Prohibition Prevention Act, amended 2024, the interpretation seems to leave some gaps.
What does the law say? Section 44, subsection 2 talks about 0.5% of all transactions, electronic transfers. But the Act says these transactions should be deducted by businesses. And then it goes further in the schedule to list 5 types of businesses that fall within the ambit of this regulation. Talks about GSM, internet service providers, banks and financial institutions, insurance companies, and the stock exchange. So these 5 entities are the businesses that are bound by that section 44 sub 2. And then you now have the guidelines from CBN. First of all, there are other legal issues that come within the foray of this conversation. Does CBN have the powers, to issue these guidelines pursuant to this law? Does the Act empower them?
Adding this new tax to the already existing 40% tax on business profit and the possible discouragement to the adoption of cashless policy are also to be considered.
I imagine the implication of this now, first for the cost of doing business. I imagine the implication for what the government itself is even trying to do to harmonize taxes. As at 2023, e-payments data was 600 trillion. So if you are taking 0.5% of that, we are talking about close to maybe 3 trillion.
Harmonization of taxes has been the focus of the Taiwo Oyedele-led Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms Committee, which seems not to have been involved in this new levy, as a statement from Mr. Oyedele notes. The new cybersecurity levy has come to the notice of the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms Committee. We are currently reviewing the new tax and engaging internally with relevant stakeholders to understand the rationale for it and decide on the next steps. While the CBN has highlighted some exemptions to the application of the levy to include loan disbursements and payment, salary payment, intra-account transfers, transactions on long-term investment, non-profit and charitable transactions, banks recapitalization-related funding, and 10 others, there are questions as to how such transactions can be properly differentiated for implementation, as well as how to avoid abuse. Ini John Mekwa, Channels Television News.
From business to health, Nigeria currently accounts for 14% of the global estimate of mother-to-child transmission of HIV/AIDS, and the Director General of the National Agency for the Control of AIDS, NACA, Dr. Temitope Lori, says the agency is stepping up efforts in tackling this. According to her, despite the achievements recorded in eliminating HIV/AIDS from Nigeria, the work is far from over. She made the remark at the opening ceremony of the 2024 HIV Prevention Conference in Abuja. Our correspondent, Victoria Longjan, reports.
The 2024 Nigeria HIV Prevention Conference is organized by the National Agency for the Control of AIDS, NACA, to consider ways to optimize HIV prevention approaches and promote inclusivity. HIV and AIDS is still considered a serious health threat, according to data from the National HIV/AIDS Indicator and Impact Survey. 240,000 young people between the age of 15 to 24 are living with HIV as of 2018. In 2019, Nigeria lost 45,000 persons to HIV, and in 2021, the number of deaths from AIDS rose to 51,000. The highest percentage of this number are female adults, accounting for 17,000 deaths. Currently, 1.9 million Nigerians live with HIV. The country ranks 4th in the world concerning HIV burden. NACA and development partners are seeking to close the tap on new infections on the HIV pandemic in Nigeria.
We really need to strengthen our effort. It is doable, it is possible, because we have the tools. This is the time to invest in primary prevention.
We can't keep depending on foreign aids. We must look at home. Imagine If we have experience of what happened in 2020 again, what will be our hope?
Our prevention rate is at 9%, and we are expected to achieve what? At 25. So that shows we are doing poor as a country. Focus on prevention and what? Resource mobilization.
According to experts, prevention lies at the core of ending the scourge of HIV and AIDS, particularly as it concerns mother-to-child transmission, and NACA is exploring innovative approaches, including improved funding for treatment.
What we're doing today, like we said, prevention is to actually stem that tide, is to reduce that transmission. Because when you know your status, then you are going to stay negative. We're going to teach you what to do to stay negative. Even when a mother is pregnant, a woman is pregnant, we're going to teach, what to do to prevent her transmitting the infection to our unborn child. So all these, are key themes, thematic areas that we're going to discuss at this conference.
Nigeria has a target of ending HIV and AIDS by 2030. Deliberations at this conference are expected to galvanize efforts towards effecting tangible advancements to ending the pandemic in the country. Victoria Longjohn for Channels Television News.
A 64-year-old cyclist is showing off his bicycle stunt skills in the Chinese province of Jilin. Zhu Jiangchun has dedicated 5 decades of his lifetime mastering the art of biking. He initially started riding a bicycle as exercise. He can be seen showing his acrobatic tricks while riding a bicycle backwards, standing, as well as holding one more bicycle on the other hand. He even amazed people by exercising with dumbbells while riding. However, his riding experience has not been flawless as he suffered from numerous injuries while honing his skills. Talking about trick cycling as a sport, Zhang Jun noted that it has Chinese spirit and reflects the country's national conditions. Even at 64, so inspiring. That's our show today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joke Rogers.